Chopper's awakening is something fans are starting to talk about after Chapter 1177, but what he did shouldn't be possible. Based on what we've seen, the only way to undo Domi Reversi is to kill the victim or overwhelm them with a critical mass of Haki, and Chopper didn't do either. He reversed it with the 5 fingers straight to the face. So if this is awakening, then it could be showing us what the human fruit actually does. Domi Reversi is one of the most dangerous abilities we've seen in the series. It doesn't just control people, it replaces them. The person is still there, but their will is completely overridden, which means your best friends can switch up on you in a second. And that creates a bigger problem because once someone is affected, there's only been a couple of ways to bring them back. So far, the most consistent way to undo Domi Reversi is simple, but extreme. You kill them. Once they go down, sometimes into pieces or shreds, whichever you prefer, Emu's not dog walking them anymore, and they go back to normal. It works, but are any of us really trying to traumatize ourselves by viciously taking out our lifelong friends? There's one other way we've seen this get undone. Instead of killing the victim, you overwhelm them with a massive amount of Haki. That's what seems to have happened when Roger and Garp fought Rocks. He was able to come back to himself and even communicate through the voice of all things before Garling finished him off, which suggests the control was already weakening. It looks like their combined Haki was enough to override it. And if you've seen my theory video on how the Covenant works, this idea of overriding someone's will should be a key part of that. But that kind of Haki isn't something most people can use. But Chopper didn't do either. He didn't kill the giants, nor did he overwhelm them with Haki. He just slapped them and it worked immediately. We even see something get forced out of the body. A shadowy demon-like form leaves the giant, similar to how shadows behave with Mori's Kage no Mi ability, and that's what makes it stand out. So if the only ways we've seen this undone are killing the victims or overwhelming them with Haki, then why is Chopper the only one who doesn't have to? So the easy answer here is that this is just Chopper's awakening beginning to awaken. A lot of people already think Monster Point is either his awakening or at least close to it. He hits someone and his power is strong enough to break the control. That would at least make sense on the surface because awakening usually means a bigger, stronger version of your Devil Fruit ability. But that only works if this was just raw power, and it doesn't really fully explain what happened. Because if this was just power, the results should look the same as the other cases we've seen. Either the host goes down or the control gets overwhelmed by Haki, but that's not what we saw. Chopper didn't overpower anything, and he didn't take out the host. He ceased and desist the shit out of Emu's grip and the person returned to normal. That's a completely different outcome. So if it's not just power, then we're looking at this the wrong way. Even if this is tied to Chopper's Monster Point, it still doesn't explain what we just saw. So to make sense of it, we need to look closer at how his forms actually work, specifically Monster Point and Kung Fu Point. Monster Point pushes his body to the limit. It's raw output, and it comes at a cost. Kung Fu Point is more balanced. It lets him fight with control and technique, but without the same level of output. One gives him strength, and the other gives him control. But neither one explains what we just saw. Because what Chopper did doesn't look like overpowering someone. He didn't bully the demon mode out of the giant. It just looked like he removed it. Like that shadowy presence just got pushed out, and the person underneath returned to normal. That feels like a different kind of effect. So if it's not just power, then what is it? So instead of thinking about this as him overpowering the effect, it might make more sense to think of it as him bringing the real person back. That only really works if the human fruit isn't just about strength in the first place. Because if Chopper isn't overpowering the control, then his ability has to be doing something else. And that means you have to look at what the human fruit actually does, or rather, what it actually represents. So to figure that out, we need to step back and look at what being human actually means in the story. In my theory video about awakenings, I propose that zone fruits come down to instinct. The user has to line up with the nature of the creature. And technically, humans are animals too, but their instinct works differently. For most animals, it's things like survival or hunting or territory. But for humans, it's connection, identity, and the ability to adapt. It's holding on to who you are even when something is trying to change you. And if that's what this fruit represents, then awakening wouldn't just make Chopper stronger, it would let him act on that instinct at a much deeper level. Also, we need to be clear about what that might actually look like. On the surface, it could seem like something else. It might look like a paramecia ability since it's affecting another person, but paramecia abilities usually affect the body or physical state, and that's not really what's happening here. Even though Domi Reversi changes the victim's forms, giving them a larger, more demonic appearance, that seems to come from their identity being overwritten. So what's being affected looks less like the body and more like the person underneath. And it might also feel similar to a mythical zone, since those could have more conceptual abilities, but those fruits add new supernatural traits based on the creature they represent, and humans aren't a mythical creature. We ain't shit. So this might not be Chopper gaining a completely new power, or secretly having some kind of mythical human fruit like a forest god or something along those lines, but his fruit starting to express what a human already is at a deeper level. So if that's the case, then what Chopper is doing starts to make more sense. Domi Reversi replaces the person with something else, but the original self still seems to be there underneath. What Chopper seems to be doing is bringing that version of them back up, and the way that shows up is through contact. When he hits them, it looks like that's what triggers the reversal, which pushes the foreign present out. That's why it doesn't look like damage. The effect just stops and the person goes back to normal. And if that's really how his ability works, then that might also explain something else. Chopper wouldn't need something like a rumble ball to force new forms anymore. Instead, his body could just respond on its own, combine them, or even create new ones depending on the situation. Because if his fruit is tied to human instinct, then adaptation becomes part of the ability itself. So if that's what's really happening here, then this is a much bigger deal than it looks, because this wouldn't just be Chopper getting stronger. It would mean that he has a way to deal with abilities that could take control of people by giving it back. And that also changes how you look at his role in fights like this. He might actually be one of the only characters who can directly counter something like Domi Reversi. And if the story is setting up a situation where the crew has to fight without Luffy for a while, then what we just saw might not be a one-off moment. It could be the start of something bigger, and not just for Chopper, but for the rest of the crew too. Maybe even setting up a kind of training arc. And if this lines up with how his fruit actually works, then we might already be seeing his awakening in real time, which also raises a bigger question about what awakenings truly are, and what we've been getting wrong about them this whole time.